And I wonder if I would have been diagnosed sooner had I known that breast cancer does happen, and it's something we should talk about, because I had no idea what the signs and symptoms of breast cancer were. But I was so consumed with not letting people know, or so consumed with just trying to keep going the way I was, because I was successful and I was married and I was trying, we were going to have children, and I guess I had ticked all the boxes. Kreena, you've got two choices here. You can keep hiding and stay at home and not tell anyone, because by this point I still hadn't told people, or take this opportunity and see where it takes you. And that changed my entire life. It was a holiday to celebrate, the end of active treatment. So I was like, oh great, someone on the plane's had a bug and I've picked it up, but I'll be fine. And I sort of said to Sati, I don't feel very well, but we're going to our friend's lake house. I'm just going to rest. I said, okay, fine. I don't want to go to A&E because this is my holiday. So tomorrow when a walk-in centre opens, we'll go in there. So we're trying to make it through the next night, and that night was probably one of the most comfortable nights of my life. I couldn't breathe, and we're here now redoing this, but it's all like so much more acute. Now I'm like being told I'm going to die in 24 hours. And I believe that I was given this path in this life to inspire others to lean into their adversity and to find a way around it, because I'm just a regular girl who's been on an extraordinary journey. And, I think that many of us could do that if we just get out of our own way.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Mind. This conversation might be difficult for you to listen to, but is one of the most important conversations I've had on this podcast. This conversation will give you strength, hope, and show you that there is always light at the end of the tunnel. Before we get into this podcast, I have one small, tiny request from all of you, and that's if you can, press the like, subscribe, and follow button wherever you're watching this. This podcast is giving me immense strength, and I know that after listening to it, you'll find that strength within you too. So if you do enjoy this podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could share it with your friends and family, because it might just save someone's life. So without further ado, let's get into it. Kreena.
Hello.
Welcome to Millennial Mind.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here today. I'm really looking forward to getting into your story, because I know that it's going to inspire so many women. And I also know that it's going to urge people to make a change, whether that's checking, whether that's acknowledging, whether that's sharing, whatever it is. I know that it's going to inspire a lot of people today. So I'm really excited to get into it. You were diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 33, which must have been incredibly difficult. Mm-hmm. I just turned 30. And I think there's a misconception that you can't get cancer or you can't get certain illnesses before a certain age. Did you have that misconception yourself?
Absolutely. I had no idea that breast cancer could happen in a younger woman at all. Mm-hmm. And I often take myself back to that space, because now I work in this space so much and I'm surrounded by young women who've had breast cancer. I have to remember that actually the regular girl that I was had no idea it could happen to her, and therefore there are millions of girls out there who are maybe slightly unaware of the risks of that disease and the fact that it can land on our door. And I came from a family where my mum's mum, had had breast cancer twice. Wow. She was diagnosed when I was about 16, but as a family we never spoke about it. And I remember she was going into treatment and it was very hush-hush, like, did the bus pick you up today? And, she used to go in transport to have a treatment because she didn't want anyone to have to take her. And I never really took it seriously because no one had a serious conversation about it. And now I think, there's a couple of things that come to me is I feel for her and how lonely it must have been, because now I've experienced that. And I'm really sad that there wasn't more support and conversation around what she was going through. And I wonder if I would have been diagnosed sooner had I known that breast cancer does happen, and it's something we should talk about, because I had no idea what the signs and symptoms of breast cancer were. She was older when she was diagnosed, and I think what really hit me was being a young woman, because no one in my friendship group or my cousins or my, colleagues was being diagnosed with cancer at 33 and talking about it, let alone a South Asian or Indian girl talking about it. It was just unheard of.
It's crazy.
It's awful, yeah.
Cancer now can come about in 1 in 2 people, mm-hmm. which is crazy.
Yeah.
But what were some of the signs and symptoms that you had that made you realise, okay, maybe I need to go get a check, maybe I need to go to the doctor?
I left it a long time. So I was getting shooting pain in my left breast, but I was also really, I was really fit. You know, I'd go to the gym, I'd work out, I'd go running, I'd dance. So I put it down to I had done body pump and I kept pushing the weight too hard. And like I was then, you know, I'd pulled a muscle and that's why it was spasming and hurting. So the pain had been there for a good, you know, I'd say a month or two, shooting pain. But I just ignored it. And then I was, you know, my husband and I had gone out somewhere. So I was married, but I'd been 2.5 years married by this point. We'd gone out, I'd come home and I looked down at my chest and my nipple had inverted. And I remember like laughing to him about it, like, oh my God, look, what have I worn that's made my nipple do that? How silly.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it didn't go back, you know, so it was inverted and I was like, oh, well, if I've just worn a really tight vest or a bra that's cut my nipple, I mean, I don't know what sort of clothes I thought I was wearing, but, you know, I was finding excuses for this inversion. And I thought, well, eventually it will just pop back out again, but it didn't.
Can I just ask a stupid question there? If your nipple is inverted, can't you just push it out again?
No, so you can't. You can't. And it was just pulled. It was totally pulled in on itself. And I kept thinking, why, you know, that's weird, but eventually it will come back out again. And eventually it didn't do anything other than remain inverted and invert even more. And actually I still ignored it. Yeah, until my husband a couple of weeks later said, Kreena, do you think you should phone the doctor? Because that's not normal.
Because I know that it does happen. It's happened to me. You know, like you said, when you were a top or something like that. And I've laughed about it, actually. Yeah. But I've always been able to pop it back out again. So what happens is an actual sign is if it goes inverted and it doesn't pop out again, or you can't push it out again.
Yeah, an inversion is a sign of breast cancer.
Wow.
Yeah, so I had the inversion. I had the shooting pains in my chest. I guess I had the warning signs, but I wasn't aware of them whatsoever.
Yeah.
So it was only when it was only when my husband said, you know, go and get it checked out that I thought I'd call the GP. But when I called the GP, again, it was a little bit of a dismissive conversation. So I said to her, oh, I'm really worried my boob's like doing something odd. By this point, I'd asked Dr. Google and I was now really worried. And I said, I'm scared I've got breast cancer. And she just said, oh, no, you haven't got you're not a smoker or a drinker and you're not overweight and you don't, you know, it's very unlikely at 33 that you have breast cancer. So book a routine appointment. So that's what I did. But that was over a week away. And then when I attended that appointment, the doctor examined me and she just said, oh, I think you've got a blocked milk duct. I can't feel any lumps. You know, you haven't got family history. I've told her about my grandmother, but because it's not obvious that this would be breast cancer. So why don't you keep an eye on it for another few weeks? And if it doesn't correct itself over the next few months, come back to us. But by that point, I had done a lot of research. Like I had been Googling it because I was so afraid. And I just said to her, I'm not leaving without a referral, because I'd sort of been on forums and I was like, what do you do when you've never thought you were going to get cancer and you now are afraid of it? And a lot of what I was reading from other women was like, self-advocate, you know, if you think something's wrong, self-advocate for what you need. And I needed to be seen by the specialist breast unit at that point. So I pushed, and she actually said to me, there's no point in having a mammogram because your breast tissue is too dense. Now, that is a fact. Like, young women have denser breast tissue, so it's harder to spot a cancer, but that's no reason not to refer someone. Eventually, I got the referral very begrudgingly. And I went to the appointment, you know, that was then a few more days later. I didn't know what to do in this in-between time as well. You just feel lost. You think there's something wrong with you, but who do I talk to? Because I didn't want to tell anyone that I was worried about cancer because I didn't know if it was cancer. So I just went about my day, and I remember after this particular sort of incident, I went back to my desk and I was thinking, like, what if I've got cancer? And I received a call, you know, I received an appointment. I went to the specialist breast unit, and the doctor there sort of pulled me in and, you know, said, oh, can you take your clothes off, and examined my breast. And immediately she said to me, are you on your own? And I said, yeah. And she goes, oh, next time could you bring someone with you? And I thought, well, why is there a next time? And I think because the GP had been so adamant that there was nothing wrong with me, I just held on to that. And I thought, well, I'll just go on my own because this is nothing. And I wanted it to be nothing. And the minute she said next time, like the alarm bell started ringing, and I said, why would there be a next time? And she said, well, Kreena, you know, an inverted nipple coupled with a lump in your breast is making me very concerned that this potentially is breast cancer. And I said, oh, the doctor said she couldn't feel a lump. She goes, oh, well, I can feel the lump. There's definitely one, if not two lumps in your breast. And I need to now get you sort of mammogrammed, ultrasounded and biopsied. So she tried her best to get me in that afternoon, but she couldn't. So said, look, go home, do whatever you need to do, and I'll call you. So I actually just went back to my desk. And I remember sitting there and opening an Excel spreadsheet thinking, like, is my world about to change, you know, like just mindful that everything can, you know, it's such a cliche, but life can change in an instant, and it really could. And, you know, I went back to my desk at 4, and by 5 I'd had a call from my local hospital to have a mammogram. So I left my desk again and went for that mammogram. And it all now, even when I look back, it just feels like I was walking the motions, you know, and I couldn't absorb it. I couldn't comprehend what was going on. I just had to be where I was told, you know, I needed to be. And I did it on my own. Again, that mammogram, I was on my own. And then I later was invited for an ultrasound and a biopsy because the mammogram sort of, I guess, gave more cause for concern. And then attended the biopsy with my best friend. I thought this time I better take someone. Then again, when I went into that, the woman who was taking, you know, that procedure on, she basically said, well, have you brought someone with you? And I was like, oh my God, you know, 2 weeks ago I was told to bring someone, and now I've brought someone, I'm being questioned. She goes, oh, there's nothing wrong with you because the GP report says there's no lump in your breast. And I was like, I know, but the consultant said there was a lump in my breast. And so we had this little argument. And she was like, oh, well, you know, she can sit outside, you don't need anyone. So they left her outside, and I just said, but I'm here for a biopsy. And she goes, no, you're not. And I said, well, why don't we do, So I said, why don't we do the ultrasound, and then that will determine whether I need the biopsy, you'll see. And by this point, I could feel the lump myself. It was almost like sticking out like a golf ball. And she left my friend outside, and I got undressed. And by this point, I was crying because I was so emotional. And I've had this argument about, you know, allowing to have her with me. And then within about 10 seconds, you know, the ultrasound went on my chest, and she said, bring her friend in.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. I'd be so pissed off at that stage.
I think
it's like,
yeah.
I think the reason I'm getting agitated is like the lack of compassion.
Yeah, it's about the person, right? So it was really upsetting. And then we went on, and then my best friend was sat by the screen, and I wasn't crying, but the tears just wouldn't stop, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
They were just rolling out my eyes. And this biopsy was, you know, numerous samples were taken, which was really sore and painful. And then as it ended, the consultant had said to me, you know, when you go for your biopsy, they'll be able to give you a good indication on whether this is something to worry about or not. So as it ended, I just said to her, you know, what did you see? And she just turned around and said, well, it didn't look good. And that was it.
Oh, no.
And then she said to me, oh, I said, when will I get the results? And she goes, oh, it's a bank holiday coming up, so don't hold your breath. It could take a week. It could take 10 days. And I was like, okay, this was a Friday.
She sounds like a great consultant, whoever she is. Who was she, a nurse?
Yeah, no,
Doctor.
I'm not even sure what they're called, the people who do the ultrasounds now, sonographer or a doctor, I can't remember. But basically it was a case of, right, she's delivered that news that it doesn't look great. To me, that means confirmed that I thought I had breast cancer. And now I've got to wait for these results to come in. So my best friend and I left, and we sat in the hospital. She goes, should we just get a hot chocolate? And I was like, yes, please. Mm-hmm. So we had a hot chocolate, and I just said to her, oh, Nee, I'm going to lose my breast. Like, I know I'm going to lose my breast. And then she was she didn't want to give me false hope. She said, you know, Kriya, I've seen the scan. I saw the ultrasound screen, and there was definitely something there. So I'm not going to lie to you, I'm worried, but maybe, you know, you might have a lumpectomy. Like, let's not figure out, let's not run to the last, you know, like you're going to lose a whole breast. Let's wait and see. You know, you're going to have to wait a week. So that was fine. And then, you know, struggled through the weekend. And then on the Monday, I was at my desk, and I got a phone call. And it said, you know, the person on the phone just said, oh, we've got your pathology results back. Can you come into the hospital on Wednesday? By that point, I knew. You know, I knew they wouldn't turn results around that quickly if it wasn't something to worry about.
Okay.
And I think these tests and everything took weeks and weeks. So I'd really prepared myself to hear the worst because it was my body. I knew it wasn't right. You know, as much as I was in denial about it, I knew that something was massively wrong with my breast. And And then we went into the consultation and my husband came with me and he was in denial. So the whole time he was like, no, it's not going to be that, it's not going to be that. And then we sat down and the consultant says to me, you've got some naughties in your breast. And they were the exact words he used. And I was like, I've got breast cancer. He goes, yes. And I said, just call it what it is. Like, you know, don't, let's not try and make this different by using terminology like a naughty. Like, you know, I'm not a child and this isn't, you know, a small thing. This is cancer and I need to say it as it is and deal with it. And I was fine, you know, I was fine because I knew that that was coming. And then I just looked over and my husband was just on, you know, he was in tears, floods of tears. And I don't think I'd ever seen him cry in my whole relationship with him until that point.
Wow, really?
Yeah, we hadn't needed to cry until then. And so it was heartbreaking to see that reaction on him, you know, this guy who was so happy generally and so strong. And now this thing that was happening to me was actually happening to us.
Yeah.
And that was really difficult I think that was the first time I realised that it's not just me that this is going to affect. It's going to affect a lot of other people and it's going to affect my marriage and my relationship and my family. And I guess a part of me thought, you know, why me? And what did I do to deserve this? But I think then, you know, my nature kicked in and I'm very much, you know, cup half full and we'll get through this. And so I was almost picking him up, which I hear so much in my community, that although we're going through the storm, we feel like we have to support and protect everyone. And so I started going into this sort of everything's going to be fine and protect everyone. And it was maybe a bit of denial, a bit of a coping mechanism. But I stopped thinking about myself. You know, I had to think about everyone else because in my head, I was bringing this to their door and I was just trying to compensate in some way, you know?
Well, you've mentioned a few times, I was bringing this to their door. It was affecting them. Did you feel guilty for having breast cancer?
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah, I did. I probably still do in some strange way.
Because I've heard a lot of women speak about that.
I think now when I look back and, you know, whatever reflection I've done on my own journey is that I felt like to be accepted, I had to always be perfect. And, you know, I've grown up being like trying to conform and trying to get the best grades and trying to look the prettiest and trying to be the slimmest. You get the, you know, I'm a Patel and, you know, we used to have this list of people to marry, you know, and it's like, oh, yeah, well, there's one good boy there and there's 5 girls for him. So how are you going to be the one that stands out? You know, marriageability is a massive thing. So I think I'd probably been conditioned to always be someone who makes her parents proud, someone who can be the perfect wife, someone who could be, you know, academic and, you know, educated enough to be independent and stand on her own feet and, you know, someone who could be a mother. And that's the thing, like, we're so conditioned to be all of these things. And then something like cancer hits and it takes everything away from you. And I wasn't, you know, I wasn't under any illusion. I knew that ultimately if I've got cancer, it's going to affect my life from here on in.
Yeah.
At that point, the consultant had said to me, you know, we can remove your breast and give you chest wall radiotherapy. That's the treatment plan that I would hope for. And I thought, oh, the first thing I thought was brilliant. I don't have to have chemotherapy. Like, no one has to know. Because if I have my boob cut off and I have radiotherapy, no one has to know that I've had that. So I went to work the next day and I said to my boss, I'll be back in 3 months. I'm just going to have radiotherapy. Just now, having had radiotherapy, I realised there's no just to it. It's grueling, but I was so consumed with not letting people know, or so consumed with just trying to keep going the way I was, because I was successful and I was married and I was trying, you know, we were going to have children, and I guess I had ticked all the boxes, and allowing myself to believe that I was about to see them all shattered, you know, was just too much to take on. But in the coming weeks, I had to have more surgery. They took more tissue samples, and we sat in one consultation, and he said, I'm really sorry to say that we'll have to change the treatment plan. Your cancer is in your lymph nodes. We've had, you know, they had to ultimately remove all of the lymph nodes in my left arm. And they said, because it's not contained within the breast alone, you'll have to have chemotherapy. Up until that point, I'd only told my immediate family what I was going through. And then we left that appointment and I was walking to the car and I've never experienced something like this before, but my legs just gave way and I just fell. Like, I just fell to the floor in that car park and was in floods of tears. And Sati had been walking ahead of me and he didn't realise I'd stopped, and he turned around and was a bit taken aback, and he just said, "What's happened?" And I was just like, "I can't have chemotherapy. I can't, because then I'm going to lose my hair, and then people are going to know, and this is going to be a much longer treatment plan, and I guess I couldn't pretend anymore." And so in a way, you know, having that news of needing chemotherapy, it hit me harder than having the diagnosis of breast cancer, because of the outward message it would send to the world.
I want to unpack why you feel that, but before I do, I just want to make you aware that I don't think you're alone in that. I guess what I really wanted to ask you is, I've heard so many people say don't tell anyone, but why did you not want to tell anyone?
I was ashamed. Like, I was ashamed and afraid.
Ashamed of
if
what?
I'm honest, that I'd let people down, that I would potentially be responsible for the failure of my marriage. I was, you know, my parents had divorced 10 to 12 years before my diagnosis. I didn't have my dad in my life, and so I was my mum's everything. And it was just me and her, and we'd built the roof over our heads, you know, from the ground upwards, and we'd struggled to get to where we were. And I just thought, God, I've let her down now. Really, like, now on reflection, it was a case of all of the things that had happened to me up until that point probably had to manifest in disease, because do you know what? Kreena doesn't listen until something really big crosses her path, and then she'll stop what she's doing to listen. Now I can say, you know, that was the only thing that was going to stop me, and that was the only thing that ultimately would turn my entire life around. I was just running on autopilot and conforming to these societal expectations. And because I was achieving them, I just kept going and overcompensating for, oh, well, it doesn't matter, my parents are divorced, you know, because I'm going to make my mum super proud and make her super happy. And so then I was trying to put a Band-Aid over everyone else's trauma. But in the process, I was just creating more dis-ease in my own body that manifested as disease, because there was no other way for it to find an outlet. Because there was no other way for it to find an outlet. But ultimately, you know, I had, you'd call it a love marriage, but I'm probably that much older than you, and so, you know, I think over time and generationally, we are finding these conversations are slightly easier to have. But when you give the example of your uncles, you know, they come from a generation where they didn't talk about their vulnerabilities, because they'd had to be so strong to just step foot in this country in the first place, you know, and they'd had to go through so much that it was tricky for them to navigate adversity. And then I feel like with me, because I had, you know, a love marriage, it was like, well, you know, I've got over that whole hurdle, but I was still married to another Indian person.
Was that a hurdle you had to overcome?
Yeah, because we had a mixed religion marriage, like Hindu Sikh marriage, and it wasn't easy. Like, we had to make sure everyone was on board, and, you know, it was tough. Like, whilst we were trying to date and, you know, get engaged and all of that, our family didn't know about us seeing each other, and our families had both wanted us to marry within our religion and our caste, and so definitely my mum was, you know, I was on that Patel list, and I was going through it, and, you know, we'd tick off who I'd met and who I hadn't met, and, you know, and he was doing the same on his side, so we were dating secretly, and then, you know, when we decided we wanted to get married, we had to definitely overcome some obstacles, and therefore when we, you know, before my breast cancer diagnosis, I felt like things were going okay, you know, like we'd got to be with each other. And then this breast cancer diagnosis came, and I was a bit like, well, if I wasn't rejected for my religion or my culture or my surname, surely I'm going to be rejected for the fact I've got cancer. And I was so afraid that his family would say, well, just get rid of her and we can find you someone else. You know, we know she's now not going to have a problem with having children, so we can find you someone who can have children. And I found it really difficult to understand where we stood in the relationship from the perspective of his family, because I guess, you know, it's so early on in the infancy of your relationship. You're only 2 years into marriage. Like, you're still just getting to know everyone, and it's a big burden to carry. And, you know, I wouldn't have had a clue how to share that news with his family. You know, he shared it, I didn't.
Breaks my heart. Because I've never actually asked somebody why they don't want people to know. And when I have, a lot of it has been around, well, the narrative I've heard, obviously never directly asked somebody, why don't you want to share? Because like I said, it's not my place to ask. In my own family, my immediate family, it was, we don't want everyone else's opinions, which is true. We don't want people coming over every minute, which was true. We don't want everyone to worry, which was true. But the reason why that breaks my heart, what you just said, is I struggle with so much self-doubt, so much. And I think that hearing what you just said around being accepted, coupled with the fact that you just overcome this hurdle, coupled with the fact that as women, I think a lot of us don't feel good enough.
Yeah.
Every woman I've spoken to at some point in their life has said, I didn't feel good enough. And then to think that if you have cancer, that you feel scared you're going to lose your husband, it just breaks my heart, because you're already going through so much in that moment. I never even considered that that's how someone with cancer would have felt. I've never thought about it.
And I think part of it is because we don't normalise talking about it.
We
so
don't.
If we were having these conversations on, cancer happens to us, you know, how do we support each other through it? How should we behave or react when someone is diagnosed? How do we, you know, make sure we're there for them without being overpoweringly there for them, or like
turning
we
up
don't
every
need people
minute,
to just turn up and start crying at our door, because that's not going to help anyone. But do you know what? You could turn up at a time that we pre-agree and come and clean my kitchen.
Yeah.
You know, like, because I don't have the strength to do that. But we
that.
need to have those conversations on how can you support me so that you can support me. Because it's not anyone's fault that they don't know how to handle it, because they've not been in this situation. And that's so much of what I do now is like, okay, and, you know, the amount of people who come into my inbox now and just say, Kreena, my cousin's been diagnosed, what's the best thing I can do for her? And I love it, because I'm like, thank God, you know, that what happened to me, but I know someone else's experience has been improved as a result, because they feel that because I've talked about it now openly, you know, this is now 9 to 10 years ago, because I've spent that time like understanding what it meant to me, how it changed me, and actually now putting it out there as an experience, but also a story of hope. I think people think it's all right to ask, you know, how do I support someone through it?
I love that.
And the more we support each other through it, the more we normalise it, the more we check, the more we know what we're looking for, the sooner we're diagnosed and the better our outcomes. So it's all just connected. So for me, you know, it was really, really, really tough. And I didn't have anyone to talk to, and my friends didn't know how to show up for me, and lots of my friends fell away. But the ones who stuck around asked what I could, you know, they asked me, what can we do for you? And that's all they did for me. They didn't need to do anything over and above that, just what I asked. And they did do that. You know, someone came and mopped my floors, you know. Someone came and cleaned my kitchen and dropped a meal round once a week. Someone else would, you know, my cycles, the way cycles of chemo worked, you know, I knew I would have a good week on week 3 of my cycle. So someone else took ownership of, right, every week 3, let's do something nice for her.
That's sweet. And I think the key thing we've got to remember is just ask.
Exactly.
Just ask.
Yeah.
Just say, I don't know what to say. What can I do to support you? Because let's be honest, when you hear that someone else is going through a difficult time, it is uncomfortable to approach that person, because you always feel like you're going to say something wrong. It's similar to grief. When someone passes away, I recognize that as I've gotten older, I've become more and more uncomfortable, because I don't know what's right. And the reason I don't know what's right is because everybody wants different things.
Yeah.
Some people want you to go around every day. Some people don't. Some people want you to make them food. Other people find it intrusive. Some people want you to call them. Other people don't want to be. Other people want to be left alone. Exactly.
And that's fine, because I don't think any of us, you know, are expecting anyone to fix anything.
Yes.
So
exactly.
I didn't want anyone to come and sort of, you know, be like, oh, I can take that away from you, because I know you can't.
Yeah.
And similarly with the grief, like, you know, I've lost both my parents in 2 years, and I think that some people are a bit like, I don't know what to say to her now.
So I'll just avoid it.
Yeah, so
which
I
is
just
worse.
because it's like, do you know what? Just call me over to your house so I can like hang out with your mum, because I'm craving that. I'm craving that sort of mother figure in my life, or just say what you don't know what to do, and I can tell you what I think might help me, because only I know what's going to help me.
Did you ask people for help?
No, because I was still living in this existence of shame and stigma being attached to cancer. So I was so afraid for what my own future was that I didn't have the strength to come out and talk about it. The irony is that the only place I felt safe and where I could be myself was on my treatment ward, because there everyone knew I had cancer. And so there I didn't have to have pretense of any sort. And I'm like the sort of girl who like will put on fancy dress at any chance, I will laugh my way through it. Like I'm like quite a I like to have fun. Like I'm that vibe of person. And so I would go into treatment and I'd make the nurses laugh, and I'd be like infusing, and literally like I was slurring my words but still like cracking jokes. It might have been my coping mechanism, but when I left I was a totally different person. And so one of the nurses said to me, we've been contacted by this charity and they're looking for someone to be like an ambassador, and in this campaign they're doing, and South Asian women rarely come forward. Like, I think you'd be perfect. Do you think you'd be up for it? And this was a couple of months after my initial diagnosis, and I thought, Kreena, you've got two choices here. You can keep hiding and stay at home and not tell anyone, because by this point I still hadn't told people, or take this opportunity and see where it takes you. And I took this leap of faith, and I can't even tell you what made me take that leap of faith, but other than, divine guidance maybe. And that changed my entire life, because I rocked up one day with my bald head to this, photo shoot set. I let them film me without my wig on. I talked to them to camera about what cancer meant to me and how I had felt. And then, we shot all this content, and then I got an email saying, this campaign will go live in 3 weeks. We're due on the sofa on Lorraine in 2 weeks. So I thought I'd better tell people, because they're going to see me, in some form of media and be like, what? We did not even know you had cancer. So I started sending the messages out. And like I said, some people showed up and some people didn't. And that's fine. I just had to accept it. It hurt. The people who didn't show up, it really hurt. But actually what's gone on to happen since, the years after that is that the people who did show up are the people who continue to show up for me day in, day out in my life. And they're the people that I need to surround myself with, It's quality, 100%. Not quantity.
And I think that, one of the lessons that I learned secondhand was, if someone's told you that they're going through something, like whatever illness it is, do not offer your treatment and your DIY method.
No.
Because I remember when someone was unwell, they received loads of messages saying, oh, just get them to drink this, this and this, and it will cure them. And the problem with that is, as much as your intention is good, if that person doesn't make it, they think that
they're to blame.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when they do make it and it doesn't work, they feel even worse, because what that's done is to give them a quick answer and a quick solution, and sometimes that doesn't work. So I think that's one of the key things as well, is when you're showing your support, show your support. Don't necessarily give unrealistic advice and expectations to that person that if you do this you'll be cured, or if you do this it will all be okay.
No,
because
absolutely.
I know it's really difficult, and this is where I say again, it's so difficult to know what to say, because when you say to someone it's going to be okay, some people respond so badly to that and say, well, it's not going to be okay. And how do you know? Yeah. So it is a bit tricky. So I think that's a really key thing, is to ask. But unfortunately, once you had received your chemotherapy and the breast cancer is gone, you were diagnosed with heart failure.
Yes. So the irony of that was that after 3 years after my diagnosis, we'd got through treatment, got through all my surgery, and we'd booked a holiday. And we decided to go to Vancouver, and we were meeting some friends that we'd met when we previously travelled who lived out there. And so it was a holiday to celebrate, the end of active treatment. Because even to this day, I'll never say I'm clear of cancer, because we never know when it's going to come back or if it's going to come back. And that's a really important learning point for someone who's never had cancer. So while we're in remission, I know people who are in remission for 10 years and then their cancer returns. So it's very much a case of I live for today, because I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. But I'd gone on this holiday, And within a couple of days, I was feeling a bit poorly, but I am one of those people who gets sick. Like, you sneeze and I'm poorly the next day.
Really?
So I was like, oh, great. Someone on the plane's had a bug and I've picked it up, but I'll be fine. And I sort of said to Sati, I don't feel very well, but we're going to our friend's lake house. I'm just going to rest. And so we rested, and I kept feeling like I was coughing, struggling to lie down. And, long story short, over the next 2 days, I was struggling to catch my breath. Went to a walk-in pharmacy, and they said, I think you need to go to a walk-in centre, and get a doctor to see you, because this isn't just a viral thing. It's something that you need to just get a doctor to check. So I said, okay, fine. I don't want to go to A&E because this is my holiday. So tomorrow when a walk-in centre opens, we'll go in there. So we're trying to make it through the next night, and that night was probably one of the most comfortable nights of my life. I couldn't breathe, but I didn't want to wake anyone up because I was in a friend's house. And Sati was slept next to me, and I was like, babe, I can't breathe. And he was like, okay, what makes it easy? Because when I sat up, it was easier. So I was like, I'm going to sit up because I can breathe if I sit up. And then he goes, okay, fine. What can I get you a drink? Can I do anything? And I was like, no, I just feel really uncomfortable. As soon as it's morning, I'm going to go to that walk-in centre. And then as the night passed, I couldn't breathe unless I coughed. So I was coughing, and then I was almost making myself sick because I was coughing so much to just get air in my lungs. We had to call my friend and just say, look, we're going to have to go to the hospital sooner rather than later because this is getting really serious. We ended up with one doctor who said they didn't know what was wrong with me, sent me to one hospital. I spent 6 to 8 hours there with all sorts of drips and scans done, and they were like, okay, she's deteriorating very quickly, but we don't know what's wrong with her. We're sending her to another hospital. Went into another hospital. We're there for about another 10 hours or so, and by this point I was sort of slipping in and out of consciousness, and I was like, why is this happening? It's meant to be a holiday. What's going on? And they thought I'd had a pneumonia or that I'd got a clot on my lungs from the flight or something. And so they were trying to investigate that. And then they thought I'd have some contagious disease. So everyone was coming in full PPE, not touching us. We weren't allowed to leave a room. And I was like, oh my God, what's going on? And all this time I couldn't breathe, and they just kept coming in and my machines were beeping. They were like, she's desaturating, we need to do something else. So I ended up wearing this thing called a BiPAP, which all I can say is looks like a Darth Vader mask, because that's what I remember. It was like a plastic thing put on my face to help get oxygen into me. And after we'd seen probably about 10 consultants, they said the last people to come in will be cardiology. So they send these cardiologists in, and one of them comes up behind me with an ultrasound on my heart, and the other one's just holding my hand and says, I know you can't breathe right now, and I know you're really uncomfortable. So all I need you to do is squeeze my hand if your chemotherapy was red in colour. And it was a bit like in the movies, when you get back to a scene in a point in time, my mind just went back, and I clearly remembered having a conversation about this red chemotherapy I was given. So I squeezed his hand, and immediately the guy on my chest, he called someone over to look, and they pressed a red button, and the whole place lit up in sirens, and it was just like, she's in acute heart failure, she needs to get to intensive care now. All bags were chucked onto this trolley bed, and we were just thrown down a corridor with my husband running behind me, and I was a bit like, how is this happening, and what does it mean?
Oh my God.
And so, we got into cardiac intensive care. I was stabilised, and then we were told that my heart was functioning at 6% and that it was unlikely I'd survive the next 24 hours. And even now, that moment in time, I can just see Sati's eyes, and mine. And it was a bit like, how can life be so damn unfair? We've come here to celebrate that end of cancer, and we're here now redoing this, but it's all so much more acute. Now I'm being told I'm going to die in 24 hours. So we were told to call my family over if they wanted to say their last goodbyes. So my sister came over. I didn't tell my mum, I didn't tell her, because I didn't want her to be alone in England with that news when I was over there. So we got through it, and luckily for me, the lady on duty, the doctor, was what's called a cardio-oncologist. So that's a cardiologist who specialises in heart disease after cancer treatment. So she said to me, I think what's happened is the chemotherapy has slowly been damaging your heart, and now your heart's failed quite considerably, and there's no immediate fix for it. So we have to try whatever treatment we can, but you're in a really dangerous situation, because what happened was I couldn't breathe because I had fluid on my lungs because my heart wasn't pumping. And so I was almost I felt like I was drowning in my own fluids, really.
Were you conscious at this point?
Yeah.
Were you able to speak?
Yeah. I really just said, like, I don't understand. And I remember saying to Sati, like, what happens when you have heart failure? Like, you don't just walk out and get a new heart, do you? So if my heart's failed, does that mean I die? So we had to go on this sort of, they had to get the fluid off me to take the pressure off my heart, but they couldn't take too much fluid off me because then my entire, like, blood pressure would drop. And that would cause you to go into cardiac arrest. So we knew we had like a really tricky few days ahead of us of managing medication and managing the fragility of my health. But we did it, we got through 24 hours, then we got through 48, then we got through 36. And slowly I was starting to feel better. Like I could lie down and I could breathe, and then I wasn't needing oxygen. And I was like, wow, like this is incredible. I feel better. And they were like, yeah, your heart's now functioning at 10%.
What's the average normal functioning of a heart?
50 to 65-ish%.
Wow.
So they were like, you're not out of the woods. You're not acutely unwell that you're going to pass in the next few days, but you're not out of the woods and you can't leave the country because you're not strong enough to fly. So we ended up staying in Vancouver for about 2 months. Which, I mean, there are worse places in the world to be stranded. And I was fortunate that it was an English-speaking country and that I had access to medical care. Like, now I look back and I think it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate that we'd chosen Vancouver. So we stayed there for a while. And then, like, after a couple of months, I remember sort of saying to the doctor, like, how do we get home? Like, should I get on a cruise ship? Like, what should I do? He goes, no, don't get on a cruise ship, because if we have to send a helicopter out, it's harder to find you on a cruise ship than it is on a grounded plane. And, we'd have these jokes because I was like, well, what are we going to do now? Like, we have to, like, figure a plan, right? And, I'm going to get back home to England. Like, I just knew I was going to come home.
What did your mum think when you were in Vancouver for 2 months?
We told her, so my sister works in travel, so we'd told her that she'd come out and we're going to do an extended trip into the mountains. Not to contact us, but we'd contact her when we had Wi-Fi. So as and when we had Wi-Fi, I would call her, but I would like set up a background to make it look like I wasn't in hospital. And I'd put some clothes on to make it look like I wasn't in hospital. I'd say, I'm fine, Mum, everything's great. Like, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And then just leave it at that. I eventually they said, you can try it. We're going to do some tests. And if you pass them, we'll send you home with medical assistance. So we did. And I got through everything that I needed to get through, and then was put on a flight back to the UK. Like, it's the first time I've ever flown business class. Like, yay, every cloud. Yeah. And yeah, I've never been so grateful to touch down on UK soil. I think I probably, in a way, held my breath the entire flight and didn't, wasn't sure if I'd make it back, but I did make it back. And from that point, I think I had a different zest for life, and a different fire in my belly. And I knew that if I could survive those two things that happened in the last 3 years, I could survive most things. And I knew, so I was in a wheelchair at this point. I couldn't walk.
Wow.
I knew I had a long rehab process ahead of me, and I knew I had to get this heart like functioning better. And so I just committed my mind more than anything to, right, Kreena, you're gonna do this. The next 6 months were really about like getting into cardiac rehab. I was in a room full of 80-year-olds who'd like gone through heart attacks or whatever you go through in your old age when it comes to heart health. And I was here like a 36-year-old woman trying to learn to climb the stairs again.
And is it common that a lot of people suffer from heart failure after?
Very rare. Very, very rare, especially to the degree with which I suffered it. The severity, normally it's picked up sooner. But I wasn't being screened. I wasn't having my heart scanned routinely after treatment, which isn't protocol. And so because of that, it just wasn't spotted until my symptoms became so severe. Now, again, with hindsight, I can see that actually I was out of breath. We'd gone to Paris 2 months before and I couldn't climb stairs. And I was a bit like putting it down to my own lack of fitness. But actually it was my heart trying to tell me that things weren't quite right,
It's interesting you're saying that you had all of these signs, because as you're telling me all of those, I think it's very easy that so many of us miss those signs. There is such also stigma about being a hypochondriac and being so paranoid and, you shouldn't look into everything. But the point of your story is that the body pump ache that you thought you had was breast cancer. And you not being able to climb those steps in Paris was heart failure. So if you notice something happening more than once or twice, even if you think you're paranoid, go and get it checked out.
Yeah, or just speak to someone who's
Right.
got experience, and like sound them out, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't tell anyone when I was feeling anything, and I was like, right, like, you know, keep going. And I think that's a problem, because we live such a fast paced life,
We do.
and there's so much we want to do that we forget to look at what's happening today.
So true.
And now, you know, and that's another reason I share my story, is about like, I'm not telling you that you're going to have chemo and you're going to get heart failure, because that's very, very unlikely to happen. But if you have had chemo and then you find yourself continuously breathless,
Just go get it checked.
just think about it. Just talk
Yeah.
to your team and be like, oh, you know, is that something I should be worried about? Or, you know, it's a bit like the whole with your breast knowing you're normal. You're not checking to find something wrong with you, or you're not checking in on your behavior or your breathing to think, oh, yeah, now I'm about to have a heart attack. What you're doing is figuring out, on my normal day, this is what my body feels like. This is what my exercise limits are. This is how I function as a healthy human being.
Yeah.
When something goes awry, without real explanation, it just sends you a warning, you know, to say, check in. Check in. Has anything caused that you know of? If it's not something that, you know, if it's something that's happened and there's no real reason for it, then yeah, think about getting yourself checked out, you know?
One of the things that I really love that you've created is the South Asian supernovas, to which you asked me to be part of your campaign. And a reflection I had recently was I felt very uncomfortable to take a photo with my hand on my breast. Very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to you on the phone before the campaign, it won't be me in my underwear, right? And you said, no, it won't be. We're creating a campaign, a clothes campaign, because for South Asian women, they want to feel represented. And a lot of them can't resonate with people in their bras. And I said, okay. And I remember I called my mom and she said, what are you doing today? And I said, you know, I'm shooting this campaign for breast cancer and it's really amazing. And she goes, oh, you wouldn't be doing anything inappropriate, will you? And I said, no, I won't be touching my boobs or anything. And then I arrived to the set and they're like, put your hand here and put your hand here. And I was like, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable. And I took the photos.
Yeah.
And I felt incredibly uncomfortable doing it. And afterwards, when I was speaking to all these women who had been through breast cancer, they had said that they didn't know that they should check their breasts. And I almost felt a bit ashamed of myself, if I'm honest, and thought, why do I feel embarrassed of doing that photo? Because my boob isn't out.
Yeah.
Everyone knows I have breasts. I'm a woman. So why do I feel ashamed of checking and touching them? So I want to challenge myself in this situation today. I didn't plan to do this. I just thought of doing it now. Please, can you show me how I check my breasts? And please, can you show our listeners and people who are watching this, and if you're listening to this, please just take a second to watch this on YouTube. It's so important. Please share it with your friends. Let's check our breasts together. Let's all do it right now. Kreena, can you show me?
Right. So what you're going to do is, there's no right or wrong way to check your breasts. That's the first thing to know. So you can't get it wrong.
Okay.
The main thing is just to feel them, you know. And so use your hands. I tend to use like the flat of my hand. I do it in the shower.
Okay.
I do it nearly every day. When I'm showering, I'm like, but you actually, you know, once a month is what we recommend.
Fine.
So take your hand, put your, you know, other arm up behind your head.
Yeah.
And you're checking not just your boob here, like you're checking from your underarms.
Yes.
So that captures your lymph nodes. You're checking up to your collarbone, because that is still like tissue that you need to check all the way up here. And then you're checking the entire breast. So
here.
from around there to under there and up through the middle. And then you're doing the same on the other side.
Okay.
All the way around.
So
and
down
again,
here.
armpit. The whole thing. And it doesn't matter what order you feel it in or how you feel it. Just get your hands on there.
Okay.
And, you know, a slight pressure. So you're going to feel what's underneath the skin. You know,
How do you know what's bone and what's a lump?
So your bone will be your bone. You know,
Yeah.
there's a collarbone there, and then there's a
obviously
breastbone.
But underneath in here, there's
you know,
bones there, aren't there?
Yeah. Not in the obviously in the breast itself. There's no bone inside your breast. You're looking at me like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So here, this should all be soft. Where your breast tissue is, that's all tissue.
Okay.
Bone runs around the side, so you'll feel it. The more you feel it, the more you'll know what's normal. And this is what I was saying to you earlier, like. Just know what your normal breast feels like. So if abnormal things present themselves, you know it's not usual. You know it's not normal. It's not part of your monthly cycle. Or you know, if you have to go to your doctor, you say, like mine did, say go away and wait a few months. You say, well, I've waited. I check routinely, so I know this isn't normal. It just gives you that extra confidence in going to ask for help. So you're not looking for cancer. You're just looking to know what's normal for you. And we all have breasts, right? Like, we all, we come from a community where like we feed our children with our breasts, they're such a beautiful part of our body, yet we don't want to touch them. And it's like, well, if I touch this, I could save my life. And that's the message I want to get home. And, that's why the South Asian Supernovas is really created, because actually, we're recording this podcast in October, Breast Cancer Awareness Month. But you'll look at the media and there'll be very little representation for our community.
Yeah.
Partly because as a community, we don't want to come forward. But then we have to ask why, because we don't feel supported when we come forward. We don't feel represented. We don't feel like we're being listened to. So we set up the organisation to make sure that there was a place for brown people like us to feel comfortable talking about breast cancer. And we created this campaign, and like we purposefully didn't want it just to be about people who've had breast cancer. I remember saying, I want someone who hasn't had breast cancer to come, because I can teach you something
100%.
and you can teach your community something.
100%.
And we have that big ripple effect when we start working together in this way. So
for sure,
that's the reason, we've set up the campaign. And we did it fully closed, because everything you'll see around media right now will be women topless or women in their bras.
And it can make people feel uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
I'm going to put a link to a video on how you can check your breasts. I beg you, I actually beg you, please take 2 minutes to check your breasts. It can genuinely save your life. And if you share this, or share just the video of checking your breasts with a friend or a family member, it could save their life. I want to talk about another hurdle you went through. People listening to this podcast are probably thinking, Kreena, how do you have the strength? Right? Did you feel that sometimes?
Yeah,
like, how do I have the strength?
I do. I remember you said something. I think it was you said something like, you're so strong. And I said, I don't think I'm strong. I've just had to learn to be resilient.
Yeah.
And there are times where I feel far from strong. And that's okay. Like,
It's
I've
okay.
learned that vulnerability is actually my greatest strength.
It's everyone's greatest strength. I believe that every single person on this planet is connected to each other.
Yeah.
Every single person. And there is one thing that will connect you to any stranger, to any human being, to any person that walks in the street. That is if you share your vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter how beautiful you are, no matter what body you have, no matter how much money you have in your bank account, if you're vulnerable with someone, I guarantee you they'll be able to relate in some way.
Absolutely.
Your story resonates with me in so many ways. And this story will resonate with viewers in so many different ways. But by you sharing that, it's going to help someone else.
Absolutely.
So the next part of your story that I want to share to help others is around your children.
Yeah.
So you have 4 beautiful children, but you were told you were never going to be able to carry your own children.
Yeah. It went back to my breast cancer diagnosis. So my tumour was hormonally sensitive. So as part of my treatment, I was put into a medical menopause, which shut down my ovaries, shut down all the estrogen in my body. So at that point, if I'd wanted to get pregnant, I would have had to come off my medication, which my oncologist wasn't happy with.
What medication were you on?
So I'm on a drug that suppresses your ovaries and shuts down the estrogen production in your body, because my tumour was growing by feeding itself off of estrogen.
So is that separate to chemotherapy?
Yes.
So you have to take drugs on top of the chemotherapy?
Yeah, for 10 years.
Wow. Oh, what?
Yeah, so I'm still on them now.
I didn't know that.
So I've been menopausal for 10 years,
Wow.
which meant that I wouldn't be able to naturally have a child. When I then went into heart failure, it meant that even if I had created embryos prior to chemotherapy, because we knew this was an issue, so I was put through an urgent round of IVF 2 weeks before starting chemotherapy. And those embryos were harvested, collected, and put in the freezer.
I guess the doctors know what they're doing, which is why they put
Absolutely.
you through that. But
Yeah.
isn't that also another thing that your body has to take?
It's massive. It's not only what your body takes, it's what your mental health takes. Because you then go, I went through IVF thinking, I've got this cancer that's potentially going to kill me, and now I'm pumping myself with hormones to create a new life. Like, am I going to be alive to see that life?
Oh my God.
So it's immense, that sort of emotional, physical, mental paradigm, it's so much to take in, but you had to do it, and I had to do it, and I did it. And we put the embryos in the freezer knowing that one day, if I survived cancer, we would try to bring those to life. But what happened in between was that I had heart failure, and that meant that whilst I had these embryos, I could never get pregnant. 1, because my heart was too weak, and 2, because the drugs I was taking, which I still take to keep my heart functioning, would damage any fetus that I tried to grow inside of me. So I knew I would have to like really push the boundaries when it came to motherhood. And I thought to myself, you know, this isn't an overnight decision over, you know, it took months and months and months to figure out how I wanted to become a mum. And I went through, you know, like, do I adopt? Do I foster? Do I, you know, have to accept being child free? And then I thought, I've got these embryos and I want to bring them to life, you know, how can I do it? And for me, surrogacy was the only way I could see myself becoming a mum. And so I went on an exploration of surrogacy. I had never heard anyone talk about surrogacy, never seen anyone become a mum through surrogacy, particularly in our community, you know. And again, this whole fertility conversation is so triggering because I think we're just expected to procreate. 100%. We're expected to get married and have a baby, and, you know, and I was like, well, I got married, then I had cancer, then I had heart failure, and now where does the baby come from? So I looked at surrogacy and I looked at all my options, different countries, different routes, you know, different costs. And after a lot of sort of soul searching, decided to stay in the UK for my surrogacy journey. And I found a surrogate using social media, which sounds very strange, but there are communities on Facebook where surrogates gather and intended parents gather, which is what someone who wants to have a baby is called. And you can, you know, it's just like any other place you'd have a chat with someone, like a dating app, or like I had one in the cancer community, you know. It's like a group of people who come together for a purpose, and let's just chat and see where this goes. And it was by no means easy, you know, taking myself into that space, introducing myself, telling people what I'd been through, why I needed a surrogate. But I did it because I was so invested in the end goal. And a lot of my work was on, Kreena, what do you want? You know, do you want to be a mum or do you want to be pregnant? And I knew I just wanted to be a mum for the rest of my life, not pregnant for 9 months. And so I surrendered to surrogacy. And after a very long journey, found a lady on an independent forum. And this is, I guess, part of my other raison d'etre, is that I talk, you know, about surrogacy a lot, to have a podcast. I remember you saying to me at dinner, oh my God, you're an OG when it comes to podcasting. Like, we set that up in 2019 when no one was really talking about surrogacy, especially no Indian girl was talking about surrogacy. And I thought, well, I've done it. I can help someone else do it, you know. So I found a lady. We got to know each other. You know, it took a long time. Like, it took us probably 12 months or so to get chatting, and then another, you know, year to get to know each other well enough before we tried to transfer one of my embryos into her. In 2017 we did that. In the summer of 2017 we took out one of my embryos that we made in 2013.
Wow.
Put it inside her. Lost every other embryo we'd made, so the only hope we had was the embryo inside her. And we held our breath and we held our breath, and 10 days later we found out we were pregnant. So it was bittersweet, you know, when I got this video of the pregnancy test. And I'd never seen like, I didn't know that you got digital pregnancy tests that say the word pregnant on, for one. Like, you know, I'm a little, like I said, I'm probably a little bit older, and I've always just thought of it as lines. So she sent me this video and the word pregnant popped up and my heart just stopped, you know. I thought, wow. And then I told, you know, showed my husband the video, and there was a pang of grief there. You know, and I think to this day there's grief about not having carried the pregnancy and not having those special moments with him. Finding out you're pregnant and you know, just the romanticism. I am probably romanticizing it because it's not the reality, but in my head it was like, we'd know together that we were pregnant. You know, he would be able to feel my baby kick inside my tummy, but he never got that. I never got that. I have to tell my daughter she didn't grow inside my tummy, whereas everyone else she knows grew inside their mummy's tummies, and we have to have those conversations. I think they're really important. But what I try to do is, you know, don't project my grief onto her. So when it comes to, you know, Amala is 5, so she's now understanding a lot about how she came to be, and what I do is celebrate the beauty of it, because I tell her that mummy's tummy was broken, but this incredible human being came and helped mummy so that Amala could be in mummy's life forever and ever. And so she understands altruism, and she understands selflessness in a way that very few do. And I think that actually, if that forms part of her nature and part of who she grows into, then it's an absolutely stunning thing for her.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah,
it's so beautiful. But I just want to touch on what you said before, because I've heard somebody else speak about romanticizing when you're pregnant, and you know, the reason I love this podcast so much is I just feel that there's so many obvious things that are so not obvious.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And one of those things is how much we romanticize getting pregnant. I remember speaking to someone previously and she said, I was distraught when I found out I got pregnant. Distraught. And she said the reason why is because she wasn't ready to have a baby. And her husband had spoken about it, and they were like, we're not ready right now. We're so overwhelmed. And she said, all I've ever seen is pictures online of people being happy.
Yeah.
And all I ever hear is stories of people who struggle. And I felt bad. Like, I felt so guilty. And she said that, you know, it was so sad for me because I felt like I could never share that experience, that it was so hard for me to find out I was pregnant. And what you've just shared around this idea of you showing your husband the picture and filming it, and that whole of like the kicking in the tummy, like it's just all we see. I've never seen an advert of you touching the surrogate's tummy. I've never seen an advert of someone else sharing that pregnancy test.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't see it. I mean, I know pregnancy tests have that pregnant on them, maybe because I get too many clear blue ads on my YouTube videos, which I don't know what that means. But, you know, we don't see, even in the clear blue ads, it's the mum. It's always like someone's holding a tummy and then they've got I mean, it's a bit stupid because, you know, you can see that you've got a bump. But, I mean, you're so right. And it's so obvious, and we just never see that. And it's like, why are we not seeing?
It's just we don't normalise alternate ways to becoming mums, you know. And I think that's a societal issue that we need to.
So Clear Blue, if you're watching this, do an ad of a surrogate.
Yes.
Telling the mother that they're having a baby.
Pregnant. Exactly that, right? And
that would be a great ad, actually. We should just suggest that to them.
Yeah, let's just do it. So you know, I think that's really important. And so. There's lots that we did get to do, and you know, on my second journey, so you know, we had Amala, and we knew we wanted to become parents again, and you know, I'd invested in this surrogacy community a lot. I'd set up the podcast. I was a real part of it, and I thought, well, I want to do it again, you know, and that was tricky because you feel really guilty for going again when you've had to have a surrogate bring your child into this world because you think you're denying someone else of that surrogate. Because there's not hundreds and thousands of them. So not every infertile couple has access to a surrogate. So it was a bit like, well, if I go again, am I being greedy?
Oh, interesting. I never thought of that.
Yeah. And so
Can you ask the same one to do it again?
So she was due to carry for us again, but then she had some health complications, which meant that she couldn't. So she did tell me that it wasn't going to be possible. And I was really sad when I heard that. Not angry at her in any way because she didn't owe me another journey, but really sad at myself for the fact that my body still couldn't do this, you know, and I had to get help.
It's really tricky, isn't it?
It's so much to navigate. You know, infertility is just such a complex space. But I knew I had to find another way. And so I went back into the forums and I put myself out there again and just said, look, we're unmatched and, you know, I'm looking to match again because we want to do a sibling journey. The added complexity the second time round was that I didn't have any embryos left and that I wasn't able to collect any further eggs. So we would have to add another dimension to this journey, which was using a donor egg. So I knew that Amala was conceived using my DNA and my husband, you know, she was half me, half him. And then I knew that the second child I was bringing into the world would be half him but half someone else. And I always questioned, like, will I love her more than my other child? Would, you know, because we, again, like I was saying to someone today, like, we live in a society where it's like blood genetics, you know, in our family, or like blood is blood, you know, it's like
blood is thicker than water.
You can't trust on your family because they're your blood. And I'm a bit like, all I've ever heard is that family's made of people who share blood, but actually now I'm about to bring a child into this world who won't. And how will I feel about that? So I had to counsel myself a lot about donor conception and how I would love my children and what really was it that made me love my daughter. Was it anything to do with the fact that she shared my DNA, or was it that just she's my child and I love her? And it was the latter, of course it was.
So interesting, because you have to challenge yourself so much on that,
you have to
which is totally normal.
Yeah.
And then I think there's also managing that level of like, why do I feel this way? Because I've had that, by the way, with so many things of, but why do I feel that way? But then I just do. Okay, but I feel guilty about it. Okay, but I want to change. Okay, but it's not easy to just change because you want to change. And it's that constant back and forth. With everything else you were going through, I have to ask, how did you cope?
I think I'm one of these people who... There was a quote that I once heard on a podcast, and it said something like, Spirit says to the soul, you could live with me for eternity and be happy here, or you could go to Earth and you'll take a human form. I can't promise you what that journey will look like, but I can tell you it'll be a roller coaster. There'll be the highest of highs, there'll be the lowest of the lows. But through it all, you will feel it all. And by feeling it all, you'll grow and you'll learn what life really is. Do you accept that journey or not? And the soul says yes. And so I always come back to, I believe my soul chose this journey. Like, I believe that this path was always going to be my path. You know, all of this adversity was going to have to unfold, because that was always the story of my life. So it was destined. My soul chose it. And so I just ride it.
So beautiful. But it's crazy that in every podcast, and the listeners who are listening to the podcast every week will hear that for some reason, for the last 6 podcasts, everyone keeps talking around their destiny and how everything is destined and how everything's meant to be. I don't know if it's a sign to me. I don't know if it's a sign for the universe, but that does happen a lot where themes happen, and I don't know what sign that's trying to tell me. I don't know. Maybe it's a message I need to hear.
We make our experience here easier and more and richer if we learn that level of acceptance.
Yeah.
Because if we're always fighting, always thinking it's unfair, always finding someone to blame, then we have a totally different experience. But if we accept it and surrender to it, then our experience of it is so different.
I love that. So powerful.
And my experience, no one has it.
Yeah.
You know? No one but me has this experience. And so I go back to the second journey, and, we knew we had to get this egg donor. And so my conformist self was like, well, I have to find someone Indian, because actually I'm Indian, he's Indian, our daughter looks Indian. Let's find an Indian donor, which was almost impossible in the UK. The pool of Indian donors is very, very small, because how many Indians do you know who donate their eggs?
0. Never heard anyone speak about it.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I always ask this, and I challenge this, that we're getting to a point where we take the help. So if someone can't conceive, our families will say, go and have IVF, or go and get a surrogate, or go and get a donor. We're happy to take, but why are we not giving? That is something that needs unpacking, right?
This is so interesting. I'm going to talk about this. How do you donate your eggs? I don't know.
Okay. Well,
another one.
Yeah.
Another one.
So I knew that I'd need to find this Indian egg donor, and I also knew that because I wasn't sharing genetics, because I wasn't going to be pregnant myself, there's a level of detachment from me. And what was I going to do to bring attachment back? What was I going to do to find connection in this journey? And I stumbled upon known egg donation, and came across an agency through my research who operated outside of the UK, but they had Indian donors, and they allowed you to meet their donor on the day of egg collection. So I thought, this really this really resonates with me. I'd love to meet the woman, because by now I'm really confident that I'm my child's mum. So I don't care if someone's got the same DNA as them, they're not going to be their mum. And I don't care if someone carried them, they're not going to be their mum.
Yeah.
I'm their mum. And so I thought, well, I'd love that, because actually when this child is born, if they need to connect to their biological parent, they're able to, because I'll have pictures of her. I'll know about her background. I'll know so much about her, and that informs who they are.
Of course.
And when, what I've always said about bringing kids into this world in this sort of unusual way, or even when in a conventional way, it's not about us. It's about them. This is their lives.
Yeah.
And what are we giving to them? And I wanted to give them total transparency on how they've come to be. So I chose to do known egg donation. That therefore meant that we would fly a lady from South Africa to Cyprus. We would fly from the UK to Cyprus, and we would collect her eggs and mix them with my husband's sperm to create embryos to put in the freezer. We left them there, and then we returned home. Then when I met my surrogate, I flew her and I flew back out to Cyprus. She got pregnant in Cyprus. We did the embryo transfer, and then we brought her back with baby on board.
Gosh.
It's an enormous amount of work, physically and mentally.
And financially.
And financially, yeah, absolutely.
My gosh.
Yeah. So we had this conversation with Laura, my surrogate, in January of 2020. And I said, shall we go in April to Cyprus for our transfer? Because the weather will be nice and we can have a little holiday, and it'll be, we'll extend it a few days and just relax. And then she one day on a phone call said, do you know what? I love the idea of April, but can we try and go in February? Because if I can, don't want to be pregnant at Christmas time because it affects my experience with my children and I'd be heavily pregnant and it's just a bit more awkward. So I said, oh, okay. She goes, can we go in February? I was like, well, I just have to do the admin and the finances. Like, I'm not having to get my body into cycle. That's your job. If you can do that, then I can do the other bit. So we agreed February. We flew out in the middle of February, had our transfer in the middle of February, came back towards the back end of February. And by the time we received the result that we were positively pregnant, borders were starting to close for the COVID pandemic. So if we hadn't have travelled in February, we wouldn't have travelled at all.
No way.
Yeah.
I mean, what are the chances that you had one embryo and Amala was born from it? And what are the chances that she said, can we go in February?
Yeah.
And then COVID hit.
Yeah, and then we get to our 6-week scan. And she'd been in, she'd not been feeling too well. And I was so nervous that she was going to come back from that scan and say we'd lost the pregnancy. So she phones me and she says, are you sitting down? And I thought, God, please don't let this be bad news. Please don't let this be bad news. And I said, is everything okay? She goes, yeah, everything's fine. Just don't swear when I tell you what I'm about to swear.
I know what you're going to tell me.
And she goes, I said, okay, go for it. I'm here. I'm fine. And she goes, oh, the thing is, you're expecting triplets.
I actually, for a second, I was like, wait, what is it? And then obviously I know. Oh my gosh. What was your reaction?
I mean, I swore a lot. How do you tell someone that and you expect them not to? I was like, beep, beep, beep. And then I just like, I continuously in my life have had to be like, universe, what is going on, and I cried, and I just couldn't believe it. And for both our pregnancies, I was the first to find out, and then I would share the news with Sati, and I made him for both of them like these little boxes, so he would come home and open a box. And with the second pregnancy, Amala had a letterboard, and it just said, I'm going to be a big sister. And then that was how we found out about the pregnancy. And then the second time around, he came home from work, and I just had like this letterboard that's saying, welcome to the demand party of 6. And I like read it, and then I saw his mind go 6.
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about? And the funny thing is, we'd had a conversation when we were in clinic with the team in Cyprus, and the doctor had said to me, well, and Laura, if you put one embryo in, you've got a 60% chance of a successful pregnancy, but a 40% chance of no pregnancy. We suggest you put in 2, which will give you an 80% chance of a single pregnancy and a 20% chance of a twin pregnancy. So I phoned Sati at that point and said, there's a 20% chance we might have twins if we put 2 embryos in. And he was like, that's fine. And I was like, of course that's fine. And then, we get this news about having triplets. And I was like, well, no one gave me that.
What were the chances for that?
I don't know. No one's ever told me.
I would love to know that stat.
Yeah,
But you are a 1 in a million stat, so that must be like a 1 in a million,
Yeah.
My gosh.
Yeah, so, we navigated that pregnancy. I think we all kind of expected to lose one of the babies, if I'm honest, throughout the pregnancy. We thought there's no way 3 babies are going to make it. There's no way. And so we held our breath.
Common?
Yeah, and also our team kept asking my surrogate to reduce the pregnancy. So saying it's too high risk, reduce the pregnancy. And she didn't want to. We didn't want her to.
Hold on, what does that mean, reduce the pregnancy?
It means get rid of one of the children or 2 of the children. And we thought, who are we to intervene and do that? They obviously say that because they think it's in our surrogate's best interest for her health. And that, this pregnancy ultimately will have a lot of complexities, and the way to remove those complexities is to reduce a pregnancy. But fortunately, and this is why it's so important to have a really strong match, we all had the same values, and we all were on the same page that if Mother Nature were to reduce a pregnancy for any reason, we would deal with that as a team. But we would not go in and intervene and remove one of those lives when we've been so blessed to have been given them in the first place. And so we continued. And she would send me, we didn't get to see, with my first pregnancy, I got to go to scans, I got to see my surrogate. The second, because of COVID, we didn't really get to see each other much at all. And there were people talking about, women who were going to scans alone without their partners. And I'm like, my baby's going to the scan alone without his mum or her mum. It's a really different situation. Yeah. But we got through it. And in August 2023, my 3 beautiful sons were born.
Hold on, August 2023.
Oh, so I said that wrong.
I was like, huh? I was like, what? I was like, oh.
Too many number 3s. So I'll say that again. But we got there, and in August 2020, my 3 beautiful sons were born. We didn't know we were having 3 boys, so that was a huge surprise. We had one set of identical twins and one other.
Okay.
And
Marla must have been like 3 boys.
yeah, and the tricky thing was she didn't meet them till they were like 9 weeks old because she wasn't allowed into the hospital because of COVID. So it was really tricky. Like, you know, we had 8 weeks of the neonatal experience. My surrogate lived on the other side of the country, so we had to relocate. So we all upped sticks and moved and rented a flat there so we could be near the babies because they were in a hospital in Northampton and we were living in Gatwick. We couldn't do a travel. We couldn't do it. We tried it and it killed us. So it was really tricky, but there were some magical moments. You know, I'll never forget the fact that I had told all my family we were having twins. And then after the boys were born, I was like, surprise! Like, brought out these 3 helium balloons. And they were like, what are you trying to tell us? I'm like, 3? What do you mean? So there are some really magical things you can do, you know, if you just embrace them. And similarly with Amala, we didn't tell anyone we were pregnant. No one knew we were going on a surrogacy journey. And then I invited all my friends and cousins, like back-to-back lunches to my house to tell them we were pregnant and showed them a picture of our scan. And they're like, oh my God, you know, we know you've been through so happy that you found someone to carry your baby. And then Sati would walk out and then walk in with a baby. And everyone's faces were a bit like double take. Like, what?
I would hysterically cry.
Yeah.
Were people not hysterically crying?
Yeah, they
like,
were.
Oh
I mean, there was a
God.
lot of shock and then a lot of, you know, tears of joy and love. And that's ultimately what I think is important, you know. I went to South Africa to find a woman who looked like me, to have children that would look like me and my daughter and my husband. And despite having 2 Indian biological parents, my triplets have come out with white skin and blue eyes. And, you know, that's just another lesson from the universe that I'll remind you every day that you love them because of who they are, not the DNA that runs through their veins.
So powerful.
And that's, I guess, you know, the purpose in my pain. And I believe that I was given this path in this life to inspire others to lean into their adversity and to find a way around it, because I'm just a regular girl who's been on an extraordinary journey. And, you know, I think that many of us could do that if we just get out of our own way.
I'm a bit speechless. There's so much I want to unpack with the surrogacy and with going through that whole experience, but I think we will have to save that.
I think we'll have to save that
for another podcast, because this has been so incredible to hear your strength and to hear how resilient you are and to hear that you never accept no. And it doesn't matter what block or what challenge you're presented with, you'll find a way.
Yeah, and I think I do accept no. I think that's the thing. I'll take the no.
But you'll find a way. Yeah. And I think that what I mean by the no is the doctor said you can't have children, but you're like, I will have children.
Yeah.
You know,
just break convention.
You can't walk right now. Okay, but I will walk one day. And I think that the reframing of that is it might not work now or in the conventional way or in the path that you think you've set out for me, but I will find a path.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I always want to encourage people to do as well, is that you don't always have to ride the path that other people have set out for you.
No.
You can create your own blueprint. You can create your own life. You can create your own journey.
Absolutely.
So thank you for inspiring me. Thank you for sharing so much valuable knowledge. Thank you for sharing your journey with me, because it's so difficult to do. But I know that this conversation will help someone, whether that's with going through their breast cancer journey or going through their heart failure journey, or whether that's going through their surrogacy journey or their egg donor journey. There's just so much that we've unpacked here today. Yeah. But I'm very grateful that you came on the podcast, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.